a little bit about creating seamless textures in Maya. So what is a seamless texture? Well, before we even get started in Maya, let's go ahead and open up Adobe Photoshop. And we're going to go ahead and open a new image, and we're going to type 512 by 512 pixels into this image. And this is really important. We're going to work in RGB because we're working in for screen-based mediums, and we're going to hit OK. All right, now my texture is 72 dpi. So if I go to my image size and just double check, I have a 512 by 512 picture at 72 dpi. Again, we're dealing with screen-based mediums. Now, what does a seamless texture do? Well, let me go ahead and we'll get back to this file in a second, but let's go ahead and open a picture of a couple pictures actually, a picture of two bricks. Now, these bricks look great, and then this is the other one here. Now, both these bricks, this is hand painted, which is really nice, look really, really nice, and this photo looks really nice. The problem is if I want to add more bricks to a scene and I want to repeat this texture, it will be not efficient for the visuals that I'm going for. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, what I'm going to do is hit Command, actually I'm going to unlock my layer, drag it to the trash can, Command T, and I'm going to shrink this layer down. I'm going to hold my Alt key and duplicate. And now this is called a seamless texture. So this is really a decent texture. You can see they kind of go in together, where if I keep repeating them over and over and over again, you don't really see any lines. Again, let's take those and shrink them down, hold the Alt key, and we can continue kind of repeating this pattern. And again, it looks just like a perfect brick wall. So this is actually a really perfect seamless texture. Now, from the get-go, if we go all the way back to the beginning here and I undo, you'll notice that it seemed to work. What happens is this edge matches the edge over here. So where there's a piece of grout here, if I lined up this same picture to the left of this picture, you'll see a piece of grout there. Now this picture, awesome picture as well, good painted text. If I did the same thing, so I'm going to unlock it and scale it down, hold my Alt key, immediately you're going to see what's going on with this one. Put it there, and let's Command E to shrink our layers together, and let's do it. All of a sudden we notice we get seams, and these seams are no good, because what's happening is these seams are causing tiles in our texture, and not tiles like, tiles you put on the floor, but actual lines and gaps where it shows that the texture is being repeated. Now remember, this brick, let me zoom out here, did not do that. So why are these two different, and how do we transition this one to look like essentially as smooth of a pattern as this one? Well, let me show you. All right, let's go back here, and I'm going to hit my Command Z quite a bit here to go back to the beginning, and let's look at the size of this texture. So currently my image size is 512 pixels by 512 pixels. This one tends to be, the one I found is a little higher in DPI. That's not really too much of my concern. The pixels are, because when it comes to seamless texture, the square is important. You want it 1 by 1, so 512 by 512 and so forth. And let's go ahead and make this not seamless. And it's a really easy process. It requires you to remember some of your tools from your Photoshop classes. So I'm going to unlock this layer again, and I'm going to hit Command J to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this seamless in here. Always name your layers, and we'll call this original. I'm actually going to eyeball the original off here and work on the seamless. I'm going to run a filter, other, offset. Other, you would typically not think you would work too much in here, but the filter, other, offset is going to allow me to click on the offset filter, and immediately you'll see the seams that we saw when we duplicated. So what this did is just replicate the process of what I did traditionally when I held my Alt key down and slid them one next to another. Now what I've done up here is I've entered half the value of my overall size. So if my picture was 512 by 512, half of 512 is 256 by 256, and I make sure they're set to wrap around. and I hit OK. Now you only have to do that once. Now that you have this, our job is to clean up these seams. And there's many different ways to do that, and it really varies per picture. So one of the seams is right down the middle on the vertical and the horizontal. So we have the horizontal here and the vertical here. If you see a way to fix it, one of the quickest ways I like to use is I like to grab, if I see like a straight piece of grout here, I grab that grout using my marquee tool, or M on your keyboard, and then I go to the patch tool and I take that and I drag it up, and actually I dragged it on the wrong one here. I need to go back to my content aware, but I will drag it up there. So let me do this the right way for you guys. Let me grab the seam. There's our seam. That's the one we want to fix. And let me go to my patch tool and I'll drag it down to that seam. And then I'll attempt to line up some of these. Now it's not going to go perfectly. You know, it's a work in progress, but we'll go ahead and we'll fix it. What we want to do is maybe line up a few of the edges. That would be great. So when we get to it, we can do that. Now I set mine to content aware. By default, it's to normal. If I do this in normal, let's go ahead and do that again. You'll see that the same similar things happen, but it kind of lightens it up a little bit, and I don't really like that. So I'm going to use content aware, which is the patch tool under content aware here. And I'm going to go ahead and attempt, and I'm lining the corners up here to line that up pretty good. And it matches my color. You can see it's not too bad there. So that's one way to do it. And you're probably saying, well, you know, it looks really messy here or there. We can go and fix that as need be when we go. So if at any point you don't like that, what you can do is actually get a bigger marquee and undo. So I'll do something like this and get my patch tool. And then I can, you know, maybe line up the tops and the bottoms. So, you know, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and where you're going with this. On how that works. So once I do the horizontals, then I fix the verticals, and I'm going to use my good old clone stamp tool for that. And the clone stamp tool will work really well. You just have to have some patience with it. So to get rid of some of these edges, I just find an edge that I like, I sample that, and I go in here and start fixing it up. And let's kind of carry over this top. These are a lot easier when they're hand painted rather than pictures because you have more control over it. You do want to vary where you're sampling from, so I'm holding my Alt key down and I'm kind of sampling to where I can match up some edges. So if we want that little cornered edge here, we can go ahead and do that. You can even sample itself. And again, smaller brushes using your bracket keys on your brush, or on your keyboard I should say. And make them bigger or smaller, it's up to you. And just kind of go through and work those out. So we can see here, we can kind of paint the base out of here, sample the bottom here, and your goal is to paint these out. There we go. Let's sample this top one, and let's do that. Maybe sample this side a little bit. Get a nice rounded brick. You can even sample the middle here. Get a nice look to it. So we haven't dealt with the vertical line yet. We'll go ahead and deal with that in a bit, so I don't want to clean up too much. I'm kind of just cleaning up areas that I know will not be affected by the verticality. Here, if we need to sample again, we can simply just use that tool and kind of just stamp it out. So now we have straight grout. So you can't really see that there was any work done here. It looks just like everything else. Now let's do the vertical. Now again, if you want to do this non-destructively, you simply create a new layer, and I'll set my settings to that this time. Let's go to the patch tool, and I'll say sample all layers, and I'll drag this out until I see somewhat of a nice lined up area. Now again, it's not going to line up on everything, so you're going to have stuff to fix no matter what. And when you do, just hit Command D. You can see it's kind of places it over. You can kind of test it. Now, if you don't want to do that, I've also seen the traditional way where people just sample areas and kind of build back you can see their own structures. And again, this is hand painted, so this makes it a lot easier to kind of go in here and deal with this dimensionality. You may say, well, this brick, I know this isn't a single brick, but I can go and paint that there. You can paint out, again, some of your, you can brush a little bigger, some of your elements here. Kind of make it go downward a little bit and start painting that out. And you're going to work your way all the way down. S for stamp. And we will paint this. Make it go down there a little bit. This one we can go ahead and blend the edges together in a second. So we'll doing this, and we're using the current layer and below methods, so we do have this non-destructive, which is great. There we go. We can kind of maybe find a nice little divot or crack we can put into that area. This one looks good up here. Let's see if that will make it. Yeah, it's looking good. Maybe I need to lower the opacity, or excuse me, the size of that brush. And you just kind of work your way to where it fills itself out. And kind of paint your crack away. So, not a bad thing. Again, this may cause, you may have to zoom in and out a lot on this one. That's okay. Just, have some patience with it and kind of work your way where you need to go. And actually, I'm going to make that a little more organic. You can see eventually it builds itself for you. You can kind of get those little odd areas that may have not worked, a previous time, when you're trying to fix it, but later on when you get back to them, it kind of, the puzzle makes sense, so to speak. So you can see here I can kind of paint those in, which is nice, and just work your way up until it looks weird. Like obviously this looks really weird, so maybe we'll just merge these two together. Down. Actually, I want a little bit of shadow because I want to keep my dimensionality. There we go. Maybe we'll paint some highlights here. Some of that. Too far there. And again, methodical process, but it will pay off, I promise. This one right here, let's see. We're almost done, actually. How do we want to handle this little guy? Let's make the seam a little bit bigger. So let's kind of see if we can't sample and make these bricks smaller. Maybe we'll start up here. There we go, that looks pretty good. And then this one we can sample over here. Scale down, get some of that black. Sample that out. And let's grab a seam here. And I even like doing this from time to time. So it looks like I'm erasing, but if I get my eraser tool, I can kind of, let me scale my eraser tool down. Because I'm doing this non-destructively, I can kind of scale back to what that used to be. So I can kind of pull back in some of the old brick there, which is really, really helpful, especially when you're trying to get rid of these seams. So keep that in mind as you go. But it's a back and forth process. You may have to do it a few times. It may work great the first time. It's really up to you, but if you painted it by hand, most likely it's easier to do this than if it was like a picture. On this one, let me go ahead and scale up, and let's paint some of this in. Make that a big brick, just to keep the glow rod. When they're big like this, it's a heck of a lot easier. because you can just kind of work out literally some of the kinks in it. All right, so all of them are looking pretty good. You can't see the line anymore. That's the important part. So when you get to that point, so you can see, let me merge these layers here. Let's put the one underneath it. We have the original, and then we have this one. It's changed quite a bit. The point, though, is if we scale these and we do the seamless texture again, and actually, you know, now we know the filter other offset, we can just run that. Let's run it. And if you don't see a seam, you've done your job. Now, I don't see a seam here. What I do know about this picture is there's some yellowish tint, which you guys won't be able to see, but I'm going to hit it with an adjustment layer. And let me do it non-destructively, and I can always apply it. Hue and saturation. We'll do a clipping mask, so it covers that. Let's lower the saturation, and you can see it's a little darker on some of these bricks than it is there, so I can always adjust that at my will. Maybe I'll use the dodge tool and slightly get on here, brighten these up just a bit, nothing big. Let's see how that works out. So I can see in this seam here, this is pretty bright. So again, I may have to go to the burn tool and kind of darken some of the areas to keep it consistent. So you don't want big highlights on your element. You just want them to be pretty nice. So let's do the filter other offset again. Let's make sure I didn't totally screw it up. Things are looking matchy. Now, if you want to make this a seamless texture and apply it to textures or to your UV maps, all you would do is go to Edit, Define Pattern, and we'll call this Stone Wall Repeat. This is the real test. We may have to end up going back and fixing it, but let's see. Making a new layer and filling it with a color. And then if I want a wall that has thousands of bricks, I can just do a pattern overlay. And there we go. That's the one I created. That's our stone wall pattern right there. And now I can have the bricks big, or eventually when you shrink it enough, you can start seeing patterns. But if you had like the side of a castle, you could do something like this. And then at this point, you can go back and hit it with your dodge and burn if need be. Now, the way I do that is, again, I like to add adjustment layers and do things non-destructively. So I could go back and hit my, dodge and burn here, but you'll notice that that doesn't affect this layer. And the reason is, and I'm very close to this, so I'm like 300% in, that's why it's pixelated, is because it's a pattern overlay. So if I right click on pattern overlay and I say create layer, what it will do is actually create a layer that is manipulatable. So I can, or manipulatable. So I can sit here and do the, the masks again. So layer, adjustment layer, hue and saturation. And I can go back and I can kind of set some brighter areas. And let's fill this mask with dark and paint. And if we saw some areas that looked a little too dark, like for instance these, I can go and match them and get rid of some of the areas that look non-matchy. And so you can see now it's pretty evenly shaded. Again, if I wanted to colorize the whole area, I can simply go to adjustment layers again, do another hue and saturation, maybe on the whole thing, and we can colorize that wall. So we can start incorporating color into that, and brightness and darkness, and maybe it's more of a reddish brick. We can also do blending modes on that. So here it's like super dark, but hopefully you guys can see it. There we go. So that's a great way to do repeatable patterns and a great way to do seamless textures. So when you do have, a great seamless texture, you can actually repeat it for infinite amounts of time without actually being able to see it. So again, if you're taking photographs, make sure that they're consistently lit, that there's no harsh shadows. Again, because think about it this way, if I were to take this and perhaps darken it, if there was like a big shadow over here, that shadow would repeat in every corner. So even lighting, no harsh shadows, and you want it as straight and unskewed as possible. And the best way to do it is actually paint your own textures, because you can control the output of those, and you can also control how much, let's turn some of this off, how many repeatable patterns you actually need. So by doing that and by making a edit define pattern, you can kind of have more control in your hands. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will talk to you guys next time.